Written by Tony Anthony Verdi. Read to you by Ollie Winters. This one's for Jonathan. A hero is no braver than an ordinary man, but he is brave 5 minutes longer. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Prologue. Death. The end. The moment in which a living being as we know it ceases to be. There is one certainty in death. No one makes it out alive. No free ticket or higher society shortcut around it. It comes for all, always. But is it the end? For thousands of years, science and religion both have speculated otherwise. Is it a desperate and natural occurrence to refuse such a fate? Or are they all onto something? A faint glow into the infinite nothing. A glow that sustains past our body's existence and snowballs into an entire world within its own quantum universe. Your heartbeat slows. Your nerves fail to receive pain and information. Your thoughts stretch as time collapses, while your body shuts down. Then, complete black. All systems and neurological synapses, along with the very spark of life, slowly decay, burning out like a dying candle. The flame may only burn as thick as the wick. Just maybe. The flame needs no wick. Within this complete darkness remains a core thought. The slightest, most faint signal of life. A notion. I'm still. Here. Chapter 1, Part 1. A Storm of Confusion. William Iris quickly found a seat at his cousin Jason's wedding. Amidst all of the dancing, socializing, and typical chaos for an entire family get-together, the wedding was truly like an echoing heavenly memory. William quickly undid the noose of a tie for just a little comfort. He was terrible at socializing. He felt awkward. Like he could tell that the other person who he was talking to could tell that he thought that they were giving him the small talk. Nothing real. No heartfelt interest in what the other had to say. He knew this wasn't the case. It was just how he would feel after getting burnt out and giving everyone his little slice of undivided attention. At least most of the fodder was absorbed by his younger brother Scott. Scott was always great at being social, unlike William. William caught his breath. It was hot in the building. The wedding was in a beautiful ballroom on the second floor of a 60-year-old building in New York. The windows, although holding a spectacular view of the city, didn't open. William would have to go down 2 flights of stairs just to get a fresh breath of air. He figured he'd be just fine sitting for a second. As William's heartbeat calmed, he noticed an unmistakable older man approach. The man was William's father. After the last conversation they had 6 months ago, he didn't expect kind words. William sat up just a little higher as his dad patted him on the back and sat down. He noticed that his dad's tie had already been loosened up. Apparently his father had felt the exact same way about the occasion. His father gave him a heartfelt smile, and William was truly surprised. His dad looked around the room and then leaned back in to tell William something. Time seemed to slow as he watched cousins and every other family member dance and be in a complete state of content. William fixed his eyes on his new cousin-in-law's wedding gown. Then, just before his dad let out his words, a roaring panic filled William's mind. A blackness filled the corners of William's vision as the air seemed to leave his chest. The world felt black around him, taking him away from his moment of solitude and leaving him with a terrible fear. Everything went black. William then opened his eyes. He was back in Dr. Young's office. Dr. Young spoke.
William?
William's eyes found their way to Dr. Young's. Dr. Young then asked,
Then what, William? What do you remember after that? What did your father tell you?
William's brows lowered with pain and thought. William had serious, dark brown eyes and eyebrows that always sat low in his relaxed position, like an ever-searching falcon. He remembered his mum always saying,
That's why no girls talk to you, William. You look so serious and angry when you think.
William was your average young man. Early 20s, stood at about 5'9", a little on the skinny side. Messy, dark brown hair and a slightly tanned white complexion. He definitely did not have the look you would expect from an institution patient. William shook his head slightly and, while rubbing his welled-up eyes, he faintly said, I think we're going to have to end it for today, Doc. Dr. Young, disappointed but holding back, calmly said,
It's all right, William. You did good today. Hell, it's the most you've spoke of it for a week now.
Dr. Young stood up. He was about 6 feet tall. He looked to be in good shape for his age. If William had to guess, he'd say he was about 55 years old. Dr. Young had peppered grey and white hair. His hair was also cut short and neat, and he had the face of an older GQ type. One you would see in the latest government conspiracy movie, where the main character played the slick president that resembled Dr. Young. Dr. Young finished while standing.
We'll talk more on the next one, huh, kiddo?
With a gentle smile, Dr. Young moved around the office to let William out and back into his room in VMI. William stood up and replied, Yeah, maybe next time, Doc. Thanks. William walked out of the office and made his slow and short journey back to his room. Dr. Young gave him a pat on the back as he passed by. The corridor stretched quite a way, but his room was on the closer side to Dr. Young's office and on the right. As William approached his room, he noticed the sunlight beaming through on one window from inside his little white room. He went inside and sat on the end of the bed, took a deep breath, and plopped back, emotionally drained. Damn. Only 10 in the morning and I feel this shitty? William tried to shake it. He liked to let things go in the morning while he was still calm, rather than have to try and let them go at night when every thought attempted to haunt him. William took a few moments to regain himself and then exhaled. He felt just a little better. He sat back up after a few minutes and walked up to his window. He looked up at the only few white clouds in the sky. These clouds were nothing like the ones in his nightmares. He thought about the rain, and how when it was the first rain of the year it always comforted him. The smell that came from the water on the roads and the general feeling of a mixed emotion in the sky. Or mixed emotions that come from within, for that matter. William then recollected on the days before VMI. William sprang up from his bed in his small New York apartment, dripping cold sweat running down his face. He panted exhaustedly and threw the sheets aside to sit up and get a drink of water. He said out loud to himself while plopping his forehead on the face of the refrigerator, "God damn it! That's the third time in a row this week. I thought this crap was supposed to stop a month ago." William drank his water and thought on the way back to his room to write about it in his journal. He's been told to do so by a therapist that he'd been going to. He writes in his journal about the same dream that continues to reoccur. Every time the dream stops with that deadly scream that howled out at William from the being that came out of the overcast. The overcast that fell from the sky and engulfed the world at the wedding. The thing is, William could never tell if it was someone he knew whose screams were haunting him, or if they came from the nightmarish creature that looked semi-human. William finished writing and dating his journal on the nightmare. He felt unsatisfied though. His stomach burned at the thought of the nightmare. As the city outside his rundown apartment became saturated with the sound of sirens, William's hand, unseen to him, was smashing his pen as hard as it could go against his journal. Dark blue ink bled through the imperfections of the white paper. William's temperature started rising. His head had been full of anger and pain for a month now. He knew this couldn't be good for anyone. William wished that there was someone to talk to, but his bed was empty, lacking a someone. After all, she was the only person William had left, or knew for that matter, in this hellbound city. Constant images of this hellish being bellowing over his entire life flooded his mind all day at work and all day at home. It seemed to always take everything he loved, even when he slept. His own mind haunted him and rattled his sanity. William felt his eyes well up at the thought of loved ones being taken from him. He tried to remain calm, but he finally let it out and cried. He then shouted while crying, "Why? What the fuck?" William threw his pen as hard as he could across the room. This was followed by the sound of breaking glass as the pen unintentionally collided with the picture of him and her on the wall. The frame fell to the floor and shattered. The sound rang out in William's head as he became nauseous and dizzy. The nausea intensified and William found himself running to the bathroom and vomited. Full emotion left William along with a flush. He washed his face. He looked in the mirror at himself. He knew that he could wish a lot of things and it would help nothing, because this particular situation is the one that he had been dealt. The ticking sound of the clock on the bathroom wall had turned William's attention. Shit. William sighed. He had been up late every night from this. He knew that he had to calm down and go to bed, otherwise he never would. William then lumped down onto his bed, wondering why the dreams were occurring longer than he had been informed. It was starting to worry him, as he had even more recently been hearing the screams in the daytime when he was awake and out in public. It makes him self-conscious around people because he flinches at the scream each time it comes around. William had really started getting scared that he was losing his sanity from the tragedy that happened before him at the ballroom on that dark Friday night. William finally dozed off at 4 a.m. after being awake for 2 hours from the nightmare. He then woke up to his alarm clock blaring talk radio at 5 a.m. William rolled over and slapped the alarm off button and started to slowly rise out of bed. He sat there with his head in his hands. He was so tired from being kept up by these dreams. He dragged himself around to get dressed and stumbled quickly down the stairs outside of his apartment and into the small gold sedan. William sat in the seat for a second with his head tilted and still trying to pry his eyes from the deep sleep he had been in just before he was awoken by his alarm. He yawned while starting his car and heading off to work, swerving on the empty black road that was covered in fall leaves that scattered across the black top from the wake of his car. William passed up the same mental institution he had passed by every day on his way to work and saw the same middle-aged looking man with some sort of scar or disfigurement on his eye, staring at him while he passed. William never paid any mind to it normally. Only this time, while catching direct eye contact with a sound-looking man on the bench, William heard a peaceful man's voice whisper out, "William." William then pulled up to a red left-hand turn signal. He shook off the chill from the cold whisper and stopped. William fell into thought. Without thinking or looking up, he started to go through the red light. As he approached the centre of the intersection, time seemed to have slowed down, and in came the screams from the nightmare. The screaming slowly swelled as, unknowingly, William approached danger at the red light. The howling, demonic scream had nearly reached its peak when William snapped to reality and the thunder from a semi-truck poured out from a large diesel engine and its horn sounding. He slammed the brakes as a black 18-wheeler hurled past him, nearly 2 feet from the front end of his car. William gasped while his heart stopped. He then put his head down and sighed, unforgiving at his dumb, tired and almost fatal near miss from the large truck. He then continued on through the intersection while no one else was coming. He then pulled up to the side of the road at a small park where he walked with his beautiful girl every day after work. William sat for a minute and then began to call into work and tell them he couldn't come in today and was feeling ill. After doing this, he then decided to get out of the car and walk through the park that he hadn't set foot in since before the wedding. The sun was ever so slightly peeking through the thick, dried-up leaves that hung from the tall maple trees in the park. It was a peaceful morning, and the birds were quietly chirping in the rising morning sun. He started to relax a little, smiling from the warm memories of his girlfriend. Looking up and smiling, he turned slightly left across the street and back. A jolt of chill hammered him as he just realised what he saw in his short glance. He held his breath, and then an eerie cold fell over him as the sound of the birds chirping came to a dead stop. The sound of distant traffic dimmed as well, while William started turning his head back to what he thought he had seen. William's focus quickly snapped in line as he was reaffirmed of his vision. There stood a human-shaped being that had steam pouring from its body, mostly from its black eye sockets. Well, William couldn't tell if they were black or just empty sockets. A screaming sound commenced once again, just as it did in his dreams. Only William was awake this time. His attention was directed back at the sight of his girlfriend dancing with the little girl. Instead of the black smoke being there, William noticed the darkest overcast he had ever seen creep lower to the city. Over and around tall buildings, the dense fog-like substance poured in all around and straight at William. William began to stumble backwards over a small rock on the gravel path. He then snapped to his right once more at the creature that seemed to look less human as it smoothly approached William from across the street. This being that came from the storm, it closed in faster and faster on William. The grumbling from the hardened and dark clouds started to overwhelm William as it began to shake his bones. The humanoid creature was nearly 10 feet from William as he turned back to it. A cloudy, dead blue skin came into focus as it drew nearer. The screaming sounds became louder and louder, and William's heart rate started rapidly rising to the horrifying occasion. William started getting lightheaded as the creature began to leap at him in a preternatural, lightning-fast rate. The screaming noise arose very quickly as the creature closed in. Just when William thought he would see the face of the dark creature, his vision blurred as his head fogged up and he started to lose consciousness. William's eyes rolled back and shut before his head could hit the ground. William, in reverse of when he was dreaming, became comatose and was no longer in the conscious world at the park. He wasn't hearing traffic or screams anymore. Instead, William heard the soft sound of ocean waves coming from a muffled source. William began to peek his eyes open, only to find sand underneath him, and waves crashing 40 yards away from a light, greyish ocean that lay underneath a cold, grey sky. It was odd to William because instead of his normal dreams, William knew that he had just passed out from the dark creature that bolted towards him. He then wondered, was that real? William seemed to love where he was so far. As the sand rolled off of his stubbly haired, lightly toned face, he wondered briefly what had just happened to him and where that dark creature went. He was quickly distracted by the distant sound of ocean waves, which gripped his attention back. William made his way up and got within arm's reach of the waves that trickled back to their origin. With something inside of him hinting at a dream, he stayed and enjoyed the view. He wished he could just soar all over it and play in the air like the birds sometimes do. Something screaming inside told him to just jump in the ocean. Who cares how cold it is or what's in it? So, with all of his clothes on, he did exactly what was on his mind. He jumped as far out as he could from the beach into the water. Realizing how far he was jumping, he slowly felt more and more like he was dreaming. His heart started to pound, like he wanted to wake up, but didn't. Instead, the closer he got to the water, the more his heart pounded. He felt scared now. While almost falling into the water, he changed his mind about jumping. With his heart pounding even more as a high-frequency sound faded into loudness inside his head. He was completely terrified and feeling defensive. The same feeling he had at the wedding. The harder his heart beat, the louder the high-pitched squeal sound got, and then... boom. His ears popped. He could hear the whole thundering roar of the ocean in clarity now. He could feel his heartbeat now. Time had almost stopped. As soon as he realized that he was awake within a dream, the whole dream world he was in then became real to him. He slowly started to lift himself back into the air. William looked down at the water while not approaching any closer. He was hovering. At this moment, all was peaceful and serene. Realizing he could do whatever he wanted, William soared. Fast and low, just inches above the glistening water. He barreled down, breaking the surface of the water at an extremely high speed. He could breathe underwater now. He came back up after doing all that he wanted with the massive world that lied underneath the ocean. William came in fast at the end of his flight into the sand and rolled. He then sat up on the beach, panting from the exhilarating exhaustion. He was as relaxed as he ever could be. For one small moment he felt content, no longer living in the constant nightmare from being completely alone after that traumatizing night. Bright light peeped through forming seams in William's vision, followed by the sounds of medical equipment chirping in the background. He then started to pry his eyes open to see the small hospital room that he was in. He sat up groggy and focused his vision on... Doctor? William then asked curiously. The doctor then spoke in a lighter man's voice.
Yes, William. I'm Dr. Jacobs. It seems you fainted in Old Rush Park.
William then thought for a second and remembered his descent while falling after the screaming. Oh, that happened? What about the storm? The doctor replied with slight verdict.
There were no storms, William. Here, sit up. What did you see?
William stared and thought deeply whether or not to release the information, but then he just let it out. I've been having the same nightmare for a month, and it's starting to happen at daytime now. I knew I needed help, and I was planning on getting it soon, okay? I promise. William put his head in his hands. He was in fear of telling someone this because he didn't want to believe that there might be abnormal issues with his mind. Dr. Jacobs sat for a second, nodding, and then politely said after finishing writing something on a small paper.
Here, William. I want you to go see a colleague of mine, Dr. Young.
Dr. Jacobs then handed the paper to William. William read it for a moment and thought, what the hell? This address is the new institution that I drive by on my way to work. William then said out loud, a psychiatrist? The doctor replied nicely with a smile.
Yes, William, don't worry. He's amazing. I'm sure he'll be much more useful to you. More useful than here at this facility.
William chuckled and thought, oh, what the hell? It was worrying me anyway. William then spoke to Dr. Jacobs after short consideration. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Thanks. The doctor replied,
Good. Good then. I'll have another appointment to schedule with you in about a week. Is that okay?
William nodded and then shook hands with the doctor. The doctor added in quickly,
Oh, and I prescribed you 800 milligrams ibuprofen so you don't hemorrhage. And for the pain as well. You took quite a tumble on your head.
William looked back while heading out the room whilst feeling the knot on the top right of his head. William thanked Dr. Jacobs again. He headed down the hallway to the front desk and asked the lady, Excuse me, where's the pharmacy? The old lady responded,
Oh, just follow these signs, dear.
The woman pointed to William's right at a sign that said, Pharmacy this way, followed by a bold arrow